Hey guys, we are continuing on today with the Iliad Book 1. This is a guided reading, so I'll be reading through the text and giving some background, some notes, commentary, in order to help you understand what's going on and why it matters. This is part 2. I had to split up the first book due to length, so make sure you check out the first part if you haven't yet. And as we left, emissaries from Agamemnon had come and taken away Briseis from Achilles, so we will see how he reacts to that situation. Leaving his friends in haste, Achilles wept and sat apart by the gray wave, scanning the endless sea. Often he spread his hands in prayer to his mother. As my life came from you, though it is brief, honor at least from Zeus who storms in heaven. I call my due. He gives me precious little. See how the lord of the great plains, Agamemnon, humiliated me. He has my prize, by his own whim, for himself. This is the aftermath, of course, of Achilles losing his war bride, Briseis, and of taking damage to his pride by the Greek commander Agamemnon. The setting of his weeping here, also, the grayness of the sea, is more than just good melancholic scenery. It is the abode of his divine mother, the sea nymph Thetis. Eyes wet with tears, he spoke, and her ladyship, his mother, heard him. In green deeps where she lolled near her old father, gliding she rose and broke like mist from the inshore, gray sea-faced, to sit down softly before him, her son in tears, and fondling him, she said, "Child, why do you weep? What grief is this? Out with it, tell me, both of us should know." Thetis, his mother, again, the sea nymph, and when you hear reference to her old father or something like that, that's the old man of the sea, this sort of her own divine father, sea god. But anyway, we hear the words of her mother here, and we get the impression, I think pretty accurately, that she is a doting and protective mother. She is very much willing to do what she needs to look out for Achilles. Achilles, fast in battle as a lion, groaned and said, "Why tell you what you know? We sailed out raiding, and we took by storm that ancient town of Eetion called Thebe, plundered the place, brought slaves and spoils away. At the division later, they chose a young girl, Chryseis, for the king." Okay, got to interrupt here for just a few things. One, to be sure, this is not Thebes, the Greek city that often comes up in legend, nor is it the Egyptian Thebes, also relevant in Greek myth, but Thebe, with no S, the Cilician Thebe, as it is called, a city near Troy. And Eetion is the king of that city, Thebe. Two, as odd as a time as it is to use this martial epithet for Achilles, that fast in battle as a lion, you'll become very familiar with these various epithets. And remember, this was originally oral poetry, so the epithets help draw attention to and invoke memories of the character they describe. So in addition to reminding us that Achilles isn't always whimpering to his mother as he is now, there's also a groove in the meter of the original poem that epithets such as this fill out nicely. Finally, and on the same note of this being oral poetry, keep in mind that fact when reading forward. Achilles is explaining to Thetis what happened, so he gives a recount of the events we've just read, and uses many of the same turns of phrase that Homer did to describe them to us. When the Iliad existed only as spoken words and not in a form that you could, flip back a page to reread, this repetition of events and exact phrases helps to cement the events in the minds of the audience. Achilles continues with his recollection. Then Chryses, priest of the archer god Apollo, came to the beachhead we Achaeans held, bringing no end of ransom for his daughter. He had the gods' white bands on a golden staff, and sued for grace from the army of Achaea, mostly the two Atreidai, corps commanders. All of our soldiers murmured in assent, "Behave well to the priest and take the ransom." But Agamemnon would not. It went against his desire, and brutally he ordered the man away. So the old man withdrew in grief and anger. Apollo cared for him. He heard his prayer, and let black bolts of plague fly on the Argives. One by one our men came down with it, and died hard as the gods' shots raked the army. broadside, but our priest divined the cause and told us what the god meant by the plague. I said, appease the god, but Agamemnon could not contain his rage. He threatened me, and what he threatened is now done. One girl the Achaeans are embarking now for Chrysae Beach with gifts for Lord Apollo. The other, just now from my hut, the criers came and took her away, Perseus' girl, my prize, given by the army. Achilles finishes recounting those events, and to my wit, they're faithfully recounted. Having addressed the wrong, he will now make a request for his mother's help. If you can, stand by me. Go to Olympus, pray to Zeus if ever, by word or deed, you served him, and so you did, I often heard you tell it, in father's house that time when you alone, of all the gods, shielded the son of Cronos from peril and disgrace, when other gods, Pallas Athena, Hera, and Poseidon, wished him in irons, wished to keep him bound. You had the will to free him of that bondage, and called up to Olympus in all haste Aegeon, whom the gods called Briareus, the giant with 100 arms, more powerful than the sea god his father. Down he sat by the son of Cronos, glorifying in that place. What Achilles references here is a revolt among the gods in which Zeus was imprisoned by the other Olympians, and then Thetis alone aided him, bringing to his guard a hecatoncher, 100-armed giant, Briareus, whose might broke the revolt and saved Zeus. The interesting thing about this story is that it isn't attested elsewhere. Homer either accesses a now lost to us myth or has invented one for the purpose of this story, the latter being likely. The story does bear some resemblance to the mythic war of the Olympians and the Titans, where Zeus enlisted the help of the Hecatoncheire to defeat the Titans and secure his throne. So this sort of inversion of that story places Thetis in a helpful and crucial role for Zeus. Suffice it to say that Thetis is owed a favor from Zeus, which Achilles wants her to cash in now. For fear of him, the blissful gods forbore to manacle Zeus. Remind him of these things. Cling to his knees and tell him your good pleasure. If he will take the Trojan side and roll the Achaeans back to the water's edge, back on the ships with slaughter, all the troops may savor what their king has won for them, and he may know his madness, what he lost when he dishonored me, peerless among the Achaeans. Here he finishes his request. Note the way he refers to himself at the end, peerless among the Achaeans. There are two ways to consider this that are somewhat contradictory, but nevertheless both relevant. One is the Greek attitude towards ego. Greek myth loves to punish pride, haughtiness, that hubris. And that punishment is certainly going to come. But at the same time, this is a world that readily acknowledges inequality of ability, where some men are simply better and stronger than others. And it just so happens that Achilles is the Aristos Achaion, the best of the Greeks. Keep in mind that duality. Achilles is afforded much privilege by his virtue of Aristewein, being the best. And his hamartia, his great flaw, is not simply acknowledging that or even indulging in it. The problem is when he lets it eclipse his own rationality. Here, for example, he indulges in his own honor and puts it so far above care for his allies that he entreats the gods to assist his enemies. So his greatness is not his demise, but rather he's letting it get in the way of being great in the first place. Her eyes filled, and a tear fell as she answered, "Alas, my child, why did I rear you, doomed, the day I bore you? Ah, could you only be serene upon this beachhead through the siege? Your life runs out so soon. Oh, early death, oh, broken heart, no destiny so cruel, and I bore you to this evil. But what you wish I will propose, to Zeus, the Lord of lightning, going up, myself into the snow glare of Olympus, with hope for his consent. Be quiet now, beside the longships, keep your anger bright against the enemy, quit the war. Last night, Zeus made a journey to the shore of ocean, to feast among the sunburned, and the gods accompanied him. In 12 days he will come, back to Olympus, then I shall be there, to cross his bronze door sill and take his knees. I trust I'll move him. Thetis left her son, still burning for the softly belted girl whom they had wrested from him. Okay, so Thetis resolves to help her son by convincing Zeus to help the Trojans. Zeus is at the moment out of town. The ocean here is not quite the modern conception, but rather Okeanos. Homer was sort of a flat earther. He envisioned the world as a disk, and surrounding all the continents and the various seas was a titan in the form of a great river, Okeanos. The shore of Oceanus being far south in the world. Belief had it that Zeus would make trips down that way for regular feasts with the sunburnt. The Greek word for this place, the sunburnt people's place, is Aethiopia, the root of the modern word Ethiopia, and that simply just means burnt face. The Greeks believed the sun in that region to be starker and the cause of its people's dark skin. Not wholly inaccurately. Other stories tell of Zeus's ventures to the Ethiopians, and the Odyssey even finds Poseidon's absence due to this same kind of trip down there. In any case, when Zeus returns, Thetis will supplicate herself and ask for him to aid the Trojans. Meanwhile, Odysseus, with his shipload of offerings, came to Chryse. Entering the deep harbor there, they furled the sails and stowed them, and unbent 4 staves to ease the mast down quickly aft into its rest, then rowed her to a mooring. Bowstones were dropped, and they tied up astern, and all stepped out into the wash and ebb, then disembarked their cattle for the Archer. And Chryseis from the deep-sea ship, Odysseus, the great tactician, led her to the altar, putting her in her father's hands, and said... Okay, so, interrupting Odysseus here, he is taking Chryseis back to her father, the priest, and he has brought with him animals for a sacrificial feast. Remember, Odysseus often serves as a foil to Achilles. With our last impression of the latter being sulking to his mother, we now find Odysseus proactively carrying out a solution to the curse laid on the Greeks that caused all this. Note the difference in their courses of action. Also note the naval imagery. I know it can be it can be easy to kind of tune out between dialogue and just envision these moments, of transportation between action as like video game fast traveling. But keep in mind that, for these people, this is no small matter. I mean, launching a whole ship with 100 oxen, navigating, landing the ship, unloading it. The language here isn't anything to be skimmed over. Anyway, Odysseus addresses the priest. Chryses, as Agamemnon's emissary, I bring your child to you, and for Apollo a hecatomb in the Danaans' name. We trust in this way to appease your lord, who sent down pain and sorrow on the Argives. So he delivered her, and the priest received her, the child so dear to him in joy. Then hastening to give the gods his hecatomb, they led bullocks to the crowd around the compact altar, rinsed their hands and delved in barley baskets. As open-armed to heaven Chryseis prayed, O hear me, master of the silver bow, protector of Tenedos and the holy towns. If while I prayed you listened once before and honored me and punished the Achaeans, now let my wish come true, but turn your plague away this time from the Danaans. And this petition too Apollo heard. When prayers were said and grains of barley strewn, they held the bullocks for the knife and flayed them, cutting out joints and wrapping these in fat, 2 layers folded with raw strips of flesh, for the old man to burn on cloven faggots, wetting it all with wine. So Chryseis is reunited with his daughter, Chryseis, and prays for Apollo to relent and have mercy on the Greeks. His prayer here echoing his earlier curse, kind of like how Achilles' account of events echoes the narration. Of course, this is partly due to similar phrasing being a feature of this long-form oral poetry, but I do think that there's also an important effect from this, whereby there's a sense of inevitability from the kind of cyclical happenings that we see and hear repeat themselves. It sounds like a bit of a stretch now, but keep this in mind for as we read on. A major theme of this story is how some events mirror others and repeat themselves, and particularly the inevitability of matters of war and how the cycle of war and peace really defines humanity. Remember also that Thetis, for her son Achilles, will soon be petitioning Zeus for the opposite outcome that Chryses and Odysseus are asking Apollo for. So we'll see how that pans out. And it's just a small note, the references here to barley, the grains of barley, bespeak its role in these kinds of sacrifices and rituals. Barley grains would often be sprinkled on the heads of animals meant for sacrifice. And the hecatomb continues. Around him stood young men with 5 tined forks in hand, and when the vitals had been tasted, joints consumed, they sliced the chines and quarters for the spits, roasted them evenly, and drew them off. Their meal being now prepared and all work done, they feasted to their heart's content and made desire for meat and drink recede again. Then young men filled their wine bowls to the brim, ladling drops for the god in every cup. Propitiatory songs rose clear and strong until day's end to praise the god Apollo. As one who keeps the plague afar and listening, the god took joy. I love the epithet for Apollo that's used here. Fitzgerald renders it as one who keeps the plague afar, which expresses its context. The Greek is ekaergos, which is made from ekas, which is far, and ergon, which means like work or deed or action. So this meaning that he dutifully is keeping the plague away. The epithet used here is a sort of callback and an antithesis to the epithet used earlier, ekebolos, far shooting. Now that the god is appeased rather than angry, he switches from going the distance offensively to defensively. And make sure you don't let the beautiful imagery here pass you by. We get a lot of action and violence and death scenes in the Iliad, so nice scenes like this of revelry and joy are to be enjoyed. And next we also have some beautiful imagery of the sea. After the sun went down and darkness came, at last Odysseus's men lay down to rest under the stern hawsers. When dawn spread out her fingertips of rose, they put to sea for the main camp of Achaeans, and the archer gods sent them a following wind. Stepping the mast, they shook their canvas out, and wind caught, bellying the sail. A foaming, dark blue wave sang backward from the bow, as the running ship made way against the sea, until they came offshore of the encampment. Here they put in and hauled the black ship high, far up the sand, braced her with shoring timbers, and then disbanded, each to his own hut. By the way, I think for gravity's sake, Fitzgerald renders it as the foaming dark blue wave, but I will tell you that the Greek word for the color of the wave is the glorious porpueron, which is the meaning of and the ultimate ancestor of our word purple. So it's a purple wave, which is, I just think that's fun. And Odysseus has completed his mission, so let's flip back over and see what Achilles is up to. Meanwhile, unstirring and with smoldering heart, the godlike athlete, son of Peleus, Prince Achilleus, waited by his racing ships. He would not enter the assembly of emulous men, nor ever go to war, but felt his valor staling in his breast, with idleness, and missed the cries of battle. Now, when in fact 12 days had passed, the gods who live forever turned back to Olympus, with Zeus in power supreme among them. Thetis had kept in mind her mission for her son, and rising like a dawn mist from the sea, into a cloud she soared aloft in heaven to high Olympus. Zeus with massive brows she found apart on the chief crest enthroned, and slipped down before him, her left hand placed on his knees, and her right held up to cup his chin. She made her plea to him. So that sounds a little saucy, maybe, the position that Thetis is taking, and it may hold some measure of sexuality. But moreover, it's a specific posture and gesture that you'll be seeing a lot of, supplication. It's Homer's typical way to have people beg or submit themselves to someone while making whatever kind of request. Here, this favor, but usually the suppliant is asking for his life to be spared. It's evocative of battle. I'll quote here from Walter Leaf. This act perhaps symbolizes the last resource of the disarmed and fallen warrior, who can only clasp his enemy's legs to hamper him, and turn aside his face so that he cannot see to aim the final blow until he has at least heard the prayer for mercy. And I've also heard it argued that it's meant to be more fully submissive. That is to say, making oneself small and the reaching for the chin being like a matter of looking up pitifully, making eye contact with the supplicandus so that he sees your pity, and even exposing your own vulnerable neck while doing so, hoping that pathos will overcome him and that you'll be spared. And this is, of course, a civil plea rather than one on the battlefield, but as I was saying earlier, these kind of striking parallels between times of war and peace are not at all unintentional on Homer's part. Her plea continues. O Father Zeus, if ever amid immortals, by word or deed I served you, grant my wish, and see to my son's honor, doom for him of all men came on quickest. Now Lord Marshal Agamemnon has been high-handed with him, has commandeered and holds his prize of war. But you can make him pay for this, profound mind of Olympus. Lend the Trojans power, until the Achaeans recompense my son, and heap new honor upon him. When she finished, the gatherer of the cloud never said a word, but sat unmoving for a time, silent. Thetis clung to his knees, then spoke again. Give your infallible word, and bow your head, or else reject me. Can you be afraid to let me see how low in your esteem I am of all the gods? Greatly perturbed, Lord Zeus, who masses the clouds, said, Here is trouble. You drive me into open war with Hera. Sooner or later, she will be at me, scolding all day long. Even as matters stand, she never rests from badgering me before the gods. I take the Trojan side in battle, so she says. Go home before you are seen. But you can trust me to put my mind on this. I shall arrange it. Here let me bow my head, then be content to see me bound by that most solemn act before the gods. My word is not revocable, nor ineffectual, once I nod upon it. So Zeus, of course, owing something of a debt to Thetis, is apprehensive to grant her this favor because it would insult his wife Hera, who, as we've seen, has a strong favor for the Greeks and always supports them in the war. I'll quote Malcolm Wilcock in his note about this scene. Zeus in the Iliad is a strange amalgam of A, the supreme god without whose will nothing important happens in the world below, B, the sky and weather god, and C, the father of a large family who has difficulty exerting his authority, especially over his wife. It's funny to think that these Olympians are gods, powerful and immortal beings who can decide the fate of hundreds of men on a whim, but at the same time are nevertheless bound by the same petty disagreements and domestic obligations that we mortals are. He bent his ponderous black brows down, and locks ambrosial of his immortal head swung over them as all Olympus trembled. After this pact they parted. Misty Thetis from glittering Olympus slept away. Into the deep sea Zeus to his hall retired. There all the gods rose from their seats in deference. Before their father not one dared face him unmoved, but all stood up before him, and thus he took his throne. Think for just a second about the description here of the face of the storm god. His black brows are like the underside of a storm cloud, the locks of hair above like the cirruses atop the clouds, and just as those kind of clouds bring thunder, all Olympus trembled. I don't know, just good stuff here. Nice little imagery. But Hera knew he had new interests. She had seen the goddess Thetis, silvery-footed daughter of the Old One of the Sea, conferring with him, and nagging she inquired of Zeus Cronion, Who is it this time, schemer? Who has your ear? How fond you are of secret plans, of taking decisions privately. You could not bring yourself, could you, to favor me with any word of your new plot? So naturally, Hera isn't keen on the idea of Zeus potentially aiding the Trojans. Coming out of the gate with schemer always cracks me up a little. Dolometa in Greek is schemer, and that metis root means like skill or counsel. And that same root was used also by Thetis just a moment ago when she called Zeus Olympiae Metieta, O wise one of Olympus, or mind of Olympus. So Hera, using this same word root, but connected with dolos, wily, trickery, schemy, shows you the differences in tone between the sweetness of Thetis's suppliance, when she's wanting something, and the sort of familiar cynicism that his wife Hera treats him when she's skeptical of what he's about to be doing. The father of gods and men said in reply, Hera, all my provisions you must not itch to know. You'll find them rigorous, consort though you are. In all appropriate matters, no one else, no god or man, shall be advised before you. But when I choose to think alone, don't harry me about it with your... But when I choose to think alone, don't harry me about it with all your questions. The lady Hera answered with wide eyes, Majesty, what a thing to say. I have not harried you before with questions, surely. You are quite free to tell me what you will tell. This time I dreadfully fear I have a feeling. Thetis, the silvery-footed daughter of the Old One of the Sea, led you astray. Just now at daybreak, anyway, she came to sit with you and take your knees. My guess is, yon bowed your head for her in solemn act, that you will see to the honor of Achilles, that is, to Achaean carnage near the ships. So Hera plays her hand now. By the way, we just got a lovely epithet for Hera, rendered here as with wide eyes. The Greek is boopis, and the first part of that boopis is bos, or cow. Hera is the cow-eyed, or ox-eyed. And likewise, you'll also hear the goddess Athena be called glaukopis, and that glaukos can mean bright or light, as in, eye color, so light-eyed or bright-eyed. But also, and not, coincidentally similar to the word glauks, or owl, the kind of favorite animal of Athena. And these animal associations are believed to be echoes from a time when these goddesses were totemically associated with these animals, perhaps even depicted as theriocephalic deities, like the animal-headed gods of Egypt. Now Zeus, the gatherer of the cloud, said, Marvelous. You and your guesses, you are near it too, but there is not one thing that you can do about it. Only estrange yourself still more from me. All the more gall for you if what you say is true, you may be sure it pleases me. And now you just sit down, be still, obey me. Or else, not all the gods upon Olympus can help in the least when I approach your chair and lay my inexorable hands upon you. He just threatens to beat her here. I mean, damn. At this, the wide-eyed lady Hera feared him, and sat quite still and bent her will to his. Up through the hall of Zeus now all the lords of heaven were sullen and looked askance. Hephaestus, master artificer, broke the silence. Doing a kindness to the snowy-armed lady, his mother Hera, he began. So before he begins, the threat worked, and in a very sad sort of child of abuse way, we have Hephaestus, probably lowest on the totem pole of the Olympians, coming to comfort his mother after his father threatened to strike her. Ah, what a miserable day if you two raise your voices over mortal creatures. More than enough already. Must you bring your noisy bickering among the gods? What pleasure can we take in a fine dinner when baser matters gain the upper hand? To mother, my advice is, what she knows, better make up to father, or he'll start his thundering and shake our feast to bits. You know how he can shock us if he cares to, out of our seats with lightning bolts. Supreme power is his. Oh, soothe him, please. Take a soft tone, get back in his good graces. Then he'll be benign to us again. So not exactly defending her, but again, we have to withhold our own moral positions a bit. But this does paint a fairly dark picture of the Olympian family living in fear of their powerful and abusive father. He lurched up as he spoke and held a wine cup out to her, a double-handed one, and said, Dear mother, patience, hold your tongue. No matter how upset you are, I would not see you battered, dearest. It would hurt me. And yet I could not help you, not a bit. The Olympian is difficult to oppose. One other time I took your part, he caught me around 1 foot and flung me into the sky from our tremendous terrace. I soared all day, just as the sun dropped. I dropped down too on Lemnos, nearly dead. The island people nursed a fallen god. So the idea of a fallen god Comes up a few times in Homer. And as you've read, the fall is a very literal one from Olympus down to Earth. And and we have even more evidence that Zeus is a pretty abusive head of his household, as Hephaestus recounts. He once tried to defend his mother from a similar quarrel, the nature of which being kind of nebulous between myths, either a similar, nearly violent argument or even maybe some unwanted sexual advance. And Zeus simply threw the poor lad off the mountain. And just as hilarious as it is terrible, he fell through the air for like a day's length. And now, before you think Zeus is the only bad parent on Olympus, I'll tell you that myth has it that Hephaestus actually suffered 2 falls. The first of which was that one, and the second being after poor Hephaestus made it back up. He was naturally a little worse for wear from the fall, a bit scuffed and limping. And when his mother Hera beheld him, the boy who got thrown off a mountain defending her, she was disgusted by his ugliness and the reminder of that lost argument. So she herself threw her poor crippled son off Olympus once more. He made her smile, and the goddess, white-armed Hera, smiling took the wine cup from his hand. Then, dipping from the wine bowl, round he went, from left to right, serving the other gods. Nectar of sweet delight and quenchless laughter broke out among the blissful gods, to see Hephaestus wheezing down the hall. So all day long until the sun went down, they spent in feasting, and the measured feast matched well their heart's desire. So did the flawless harp held by Apollo, and heavenly songs and the choiring antiphon, and all the muses sang. So Hephaestus has defended his mother just in a more roundabout way, making himself the butt of the joke here. I'm sorry to belabor so much the idea of repetition and parallels in Homer, but I would be remiss to say that, of course, the language used for Hephaestus, serving the nectar, is supposed to invoke the earlier scene of that hecatomb at Chryse, with the serving and going around of the wine bowl. Whether it's War and Peace or God and Man, Homer has this sense of the inevitability of nature, that the way life goes is just the way it goes, regardless of whatever incarnation it's in or whatever form it's currently taking. Also, you may have heard the term Homeric laughter. It refers to this sort of thing here, what Homer calls here and in the Odyssey, asbestos gelos, the sort of raucous laughter that you just cannot repress. And 2 out of the 3 times that Homer uses this phrase, it is at the expense of poor Hephaestus. And when the shining sun of day sank in the west, they turned homeward each one to rest, each to that home the bandy-legged wondrous artisan Hephaestus fashioned for them with his craft. The lord of storm and lightning Zeus retired, and shut his eyes where sweet sleep ever came to him, and at his side lay Hera, goddess of the golden chair. So there you go. We got a good punchline, and now we're wrapping up with the cozy little good night scene. I adore this book so much. Obviously, I love the whole of the Iliad, but as with a lot of things, the first part is so iconic. The part 1 of any given thing has to do a lot of footwork, laying all the ground for everything to come. Introductions, world building, establishing what's what and who's who. It has to be very mindfully written in a way that later parts can reference and call back to. But it can't be entirely forward-thinking and focused on the future. The onus is on it, more than any other part, to be a complete and holistic story in its own right. Otherwise, why would the audience be interested in what's next? And I think, and I hope I've been able to convince you to agree, that Book 1 of the Iliad here excels in both of those areas. And if you are still with me now, I thank you. This is something I could fucking talk about for hours, and God willing, I will do that. If I can get any small viewership for these, I'll keep going. So as always, my gratitude, and have a good day.